right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Pederson. I'm the Executive Director of Mass Waterworks Association. I want to thank you for joining us today to resume our now quarterly calls with DEP. And so this meeting is being recorded, as you just heard. And I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Suberg to kick us off and get us started. And then I think we do have a few poll questions today that we wanted to launch at the appropriate time, just to kind of get some input from folks on supply chain issues and that sort of thing. So with that, Commissioner.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Jen, and thank you, everybody. I appreciate us continuing these calls. As you know, we started on the new quarterly cycle, and hopefully that's going to work well for everybody. Obviously, if we need additional ways of communicating, the door is always open, and I think the cell phone is always on, so we'll make sure that we're continuing to engage like that. With me is today Kathy Baskin, Yvette DePeiza, and Damon Gutterman, as well as our colleagues from the regions, to make sure that we are all hearing the same things and working on the same issues together. As Jen Pederson noted, the call is recorded. We do post the recording on our MassDEP website, and you can find it there for reference. Typically, we get an update from our licensing board from Mike Maynard. Mike is not here with us today, but Yvette DePeiza is prepared to fill in and provide the update. So Yvette, if I could, I'll turn the floor over to you right now.
Thank you, Marty. Michael asked that I let you know that this is a renewal year. License expire 12/31/21. And given the impact of COVID, the board has worked to make sure that there are numerous options for online training that provide training credits. This is the second renewal period conducted entirely online. The first period happened right before COVID, and perhaps related, we had a drop in the number of license for operators who renewed at the end of 2019. However, Michael has reviewed the numbers for the end of 2020, and we're about back to where we were in terms of numbers of license. And for public water systems, in our last In the Main newsletter, we included a summary of the persons that have taken certification exams and the pass and failure rates across the program. So if you need us to send that information out again to you, we are happy to do so. Also, we want to note that the pass and failure rates for license in 2020 versus 2019 was fairly consistent. And this is really impressive given all that all of you and us here and at the board have had to go through dealing with COVID regarding trainings and schedules and all that was a part of staying on top of this work. So that's his update, which I provided, and we're happy to send out the information from the statistics for the certified operators to you if you didn't see it in the last In the Main newsletter. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks. And Yvette, I might ask you to stay a little longer. I know there have been some issues and workarounds. We've been dealing with EDEP, and I know there's been a lot of communication on that, but I think you wanted to use this opportunity to give the latest update. So if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, thank you again, Marty. And all of our water suppliers and our labs are aware that we have been working to update our EDP monitoring data program to accept PFAS data, but also to accept multi-contaminant data that would come in through EDP. The EDP system was taken offline so that we could conduct the update, which unfortunately has taken a bit longer than we anticipated. In the meantime, we have identified an alternate track to ensure that all of the data that has gone to our labs, that we're aware of it, so that we do not have any issues associated with receipt of that data. And we're encouraging labs, in fact, working with our labs for them to submit that information via a text file. And we're also encouraging PWSs to send their lab reports via email to the P-Director mailbox. And we are very hopeful that later on this week or very soon, we will have EDP back up and running. And I do want to say that both labs and public water suppliers have been receiving weekly updates from us as to where we are with the process. And as soon as we have the update in place, you will receive. We are to help with any other issues that may come up. So thank you for the opportunity to let you know this, but also thank you for bearing with us. There's a little bit more patience as we work through this issue, trying to get the update to the EDP finalized and rolled out. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Yvette. And, you know, obviously, if there are any questions that arise from this, you know, we can certainly talk about this during this session. But, you know, to underscore what Yvette said, I know they're working really hard to have it back online very soon. And, you know, we're committed to that. So with that, I will now turn it. We are fortunate to be joined by Jane Downing from EPA Region 1, head of the drinking water program. I'll just say, for starters, and I'm sure she's going to want to talk about it, I got to be at a wonderful ceremony today where based on a nomination from Jane, EPA Region 1 recognized the states and the water operators for the work we did together dealing with the COVID uncertainty. And it was a good reminder, as Jane was ticking off many of the elements of the work together. It was a good reminder of our cooperation and you know, just how important ongoing communication is. So Jane, if you wouldn't mind, appreciate any updates you'd like to provide.
Sure. So certainly, let's begin on a high note. We were so pleased earlier today to provide the highest award that we can in EPA Region 1, and that's the Environmental Merit Award. And it was given on behalf of the utilities. I wish I could give it to each of the 10,000 utilities in New England, but on behalf of the utilities and the millions of people that rely on safe drinking water, we provided the award to the state drinking water programs, including MassDEP and the Waterworks Association, including Jen Pederson and Mass Waterworks, the state warrants, including Mass Warren, and the Mass Rural Water Association, as well as the others. So it was an award that was just so well deserved. We all know what we've been through over the last year and a half and know that it's not over yet. Hence, this is why we have these meetings that are coming up. So let's just take the day to appreciate all you've done and know that we're all working this in the future. So that's that. Congratulations. I have a few updates today. The first one is to walk you through a few workshops. They are all free, which is helpful. So let me tell you about them. But first of all, it's often hard to give you how you register. So Kathy Baskin has told us that it is going to be, the flyers will be posted on the Massachusetts website, the COVID website for water utilities. I will also tell you how to get to it if you go Google. First one, water security workshops, which we all know we need to be paying attention to. There are 3 sets of workshops coming up in September, October, and November, hosted by EPA in Horsley and Witten and Booz Allen. These are really terrific workshops. I know I've been on a few of them in the past. So if you're interested in that, please check in to register for them. And it's for 2 half-day sessions. So we need you for 2 days. You can Google EPA cybersecurity workshops. The second one is actually very happy to host EPA and MassDEP, a workshop called EPA and Massachusetts Water and Energy Utility Resilience Virtual Workshop, all about trying to figure out how these utilities can be less reliant on energy. And as you know, things happen which affect our power supply. So again, if you're interested, there are 3 separate sessions in October, the 26th, 27th, and 28th. Another challenge, extreme weather. NOAA is putting on workshops specifically for water utilities. And that is going to be at the end of September and early October. If you're interested in that, you can Google NOAA Our Changing Precipitation webinar series, but they are very specific for water utilities. And finally, very timely to this call, EPA, I don't know if you remember this, but months and months ago, we sent out a survey to drinking water and wastewater utilities about impacts from COVID. That report has been put together and is now out for distribution. And it's very interesting. If you're interested in looking at it, you can Google Water Sector COVID Summary Report. It talks about how all of you have been affected, including things like 1/3 of those responding noticed that they had problems with chemical supply chain shortages. So you're not alone when you read some of the impacts that have been felt across the country. So look for that report. And then finally, Jen, I don't know if you want me to go into the chemical supply chain issues, or do we do the questions? What's your preference?
Why don't you start to talk about it and I will launch a poll. We want to try and get some sense of what folks are seeing in terms of supply chain issues. So I will launch a poll and Jane can begin talking about what EPA is doing in this regard.
Okay. I'm going to say, first of all, very much appreciate the coordination, not surprised that we are hanging together, trying to understand what's going on with the supply chain issue. It's not going to go away quickly, but what we're hearing so far are lots of challenges across the sector, drinking water and wastewater, specifically things relating to chlorine and chlorine-derived products, liquid oxygen, phosphates and polymers, fluoride, liquid citric acid. Some of the products that have been challenging are UV lamps and PVC pipes. So those are just to name a few of what we're hearing. And I appreciate, again, all the communication going on relating to these challenges. The causes are quite varied. I think it's humbling to know that things that happen in Texas in the West, they do affect us in the East. So that things like the winter freezes in Texas, hurricanes in Florida, interesting wrinkle about increasing hospitalization, which affect the liquid oxygen available to the south, and now moving up into the east. On the West Coast, there were issues with plants, specific, I think, to Westlake. So many causes. The impacts that we have heard from Jen and others and Massachusetts DEP and from all of you include force majeure letters that have been given out, which basically affect your contracts with your suppliers, delays in providing the products, and price increases. So in terms of what we are recommending, again, we're dealing with this across the country, but I would advise you in your free time to check out EPA's website. It's very specific to the water supply chain impacts. And you can Google that 1441 process, which is I'm going to talk about in a minute, or chemical supply chain issues, EPA. Do we want to pause and do the questions, or should I continue, Jen?
Yes, if everyone could just, if you haven't already, just fill in your answers on the polls. Hopefully you're seeing these 6 questions that relate to if your utility is having difficulty getting critical chemicals, and then which of the chemicals are you having difficulty with? Is your utility having difficulty getting distribution system components or building materials or treatment components or price increases? And then whether or not you have found workarounds or have plans for any of these issues, because certainly we're hearing that people are having issues, but we're also hearing that people are sort of finding another supplier or contacting a neighbor. So we just want to make sure that people are getting the materials that they need. So just I'll give it another 10 seconds and then we'll launch the poll. And Damon tells me that I have a mistake on question 4. So choice 1 would be yes and choice 2 would be no. Sorry about that. We were doing this late last evening. All right, so let me end the poll. We don't have that many participants. I'm not sure whether we've just, we have a lot of, I think, state staff on the call too. So let me end the poll and we'll see what the results are here. So about half of you have had difficulty getting critical chemicals, disinfectants, corrosion control, fluoride. The liquid oxygen one, I know not as many people use. Difficulty getting distribution system components. So 7 out of the 9 of you are answered yes. Building materials, 6 of the 9 of you answered yes. Price increases, almost everyone answered yes. And 6 of the 9 have workarounds in place. So I guess I would say to the 3 of you who don't have workarounds, please feel free to reach out to your regional staff and discuss if you're having issues. Okay, Jane, I'm going to stop that and you can.
Okay. Very interesting and certainly very challenging. So I wanted to just talk about some recommendations based on the experiences that we've had across the country, and then specifically this thing called 1441, which is a special authority in the Safe Drinking Water Act that to date has never been used, but it's rather pertinent to what we're talking about. So here's the recommendations that we would share with all of you today. I think the first one is obvious. We all need to plan ahead as never before. So plan ahead on your supplies. Try to think about extra storage where that makes sense. And certainly make sure that you know where there are alternate suppliers. So if you're faced with a situation where your primary supplier is not available, do you know quickly whom to reach out to? So talk to one another, as I know you do. The second one is continue the coordination with MassDEP and Mass Waterworks Association. We do need to hear about whether there are systemic trends, whether it's happening across many cases, many utilities, or whether it's just a case-by-case situation which can be resolved. It's important to know how this challenge might need to be escalated and when. So continue this great coordination. The third recommendation is if you're faced with a situation, negotiate that contract. And I will offer that there's a letter that was signed by the administrator of EPA. He specifically wrote a letter to the chemical sector saying that we are requesting that chemical manufacturers and suppliers prioritize drinking water and wastewater systems as customers of chemicals and treatment substances. So this is a very, I think, thoughtful and impactful letter that you can use to leverage your negotiations with the supplier. I will tell you that we heard from a large utility in Massachusetts who received a force majeure letter, and they used the letter and they were able to convince the supplier that they needed 100% of their contract, what was contracted. So it can help. I'm not saying it's going to help across the board, but at least it might give the supplier a sense of how critical drinking water and wastewater utilities are in terms of supplying. So that's the third one. And the last one is, if you ultimately cannot find alternate supplies, including using Mass Warn or other utilities to get you through, then there is something called 1441 of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Again, never been used, but it is available for us to pursue. So let me take a few minutes on that. The criteria for evoking 1441 is if chemicals may not be reasonably available in the quantity needed for treatment and in the future. So again, that is assuming that the local and regional and state issues, those contingency plans have been exhausted. I would, instead of walking through step by step what this means, again, check out the website, the EPA website, try 1441 process, or you can go with EPA critical supply chain, and this should get you into the website. But in summary, EPA has the authority to compel the Department of Commerce to order certain producers, manufacturers, packagers to supply chemicals to public water supply systems and POTWs if the chemicals are not reasonably available in time for your treatment. So what we would do is we would ask each entity to submit an application, a certification of need. That is on the website. You can see what kind of information is required. It's very specific to the particular case. EPA may have to publish a Federal Register notice. And after that, we can then work with the Department of Commerce. They have 7 days if we issue the certificate to do these orders to manufacturers. So you can see that there is that avenue available, but it tends to be somewhat time consuming. So you're going to have to plan ahead if that's where you want to go. So I, again, suggest that you check the website. You can see what the application looks like. And again, encourage all of you to continue the coordination, because there may be stuff and steps that we can take before we ultimately go into a formal application. And that's all I wanted to say. Just wanted to make sure people knew about it. Okay, Jen, back to you.
Thank you, Jane. And I will say also, I know some folks with the issue of fluoride, DPH has been sending out information to water suppliers asking, because they are aware of the shortage of dry community water fluoridation products, which is affecting some communities in Massachusetts. They say if your community is affected by this shortage and you are unable to purchase fluoride product, please continue to adjust the fluoride in your community water supply to the optimal level, 0.7 milligrams per liter, until you run out of product. Once you run out of product, please make note of the issue on your fluoridation report and continue to submit those reports electronically on a monthly basis to Heather Babineau. So that's the guidance they're giving now, and they're certainly watching it closely at DPH. So with that, Commissioner, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks. And we do want to make sure there's time for questions, but just a couple of updates that that we wanted to provide. And this is a little bit on the financing side of the house. You know, two things we wanted to highlight. First, as you know, the administration has a proposal to spend $400 million of the ARPA funding that the state has already received for water and wastewater projects. Again, we think this is a really important opportunity, and our secretary testified on this last Thursday on a hearing, and I believe Jen Pederson was also there to testify, as some of the members here were as well, and we appreciate support, because this would be funding that could be used. There was a lot of discussion about getting to combined sewer overflow projects. This is also funding that can be used for PFAS and other drinking water projects. It's an opportunity here to provide additional sources of funding again, our plans would be, you know, to work with, you know, the Clean Water Trust to really leverage that funding, you know, additional opportunities for real support for communities. And we're hopeful that the legislature will move it. The money is supposed to be spent, you know, in over the next few years. We know you have projects that could be spent. You've been obviously doing the best you can with using the SRF program. This is an additional source of funding that can provide additional opportunities. So, you know, our secretary and all of us have been doing our bit to support that effort. One of the things we've talked about in the past during COVID was also the some of the other federal relief funds that are coming our way. As you know, some of the funding is coming directly to municipalities. Others of it will go through the state. And the one I'm talking about now is the low-income household drinking water and wastewater emergency assistance program. As you know, there was $638 million allocated nationwide. We've been waiting to see how that money gets distributed. We know that the funding will come to our Department of Housing and Community Development. They will receive the funds and submit a plan for that use of those funds to the Federal Health and Human Services Department. Our colleagues at HCD have a draft grant implementation program that was put out for public comment on August 31st, 2021. So, you know, we'll be looking for more details on that, but it seems like there's some progress on that source of funding that some of you have asked about. And so with that, those are my two funding updates. Jen, I didn't know, you might have should we turn over for Q's and A's, or you might have one more survey question.
Yeah, let's do one more poll question. So we had a question that came to DEP from a utility about vaccination status and whether or not utilities were requiring vaccination. So I thought maybe we could just poll people as well on vaccinations and whether or not your utility is requiring vaccinations for your employees. And then I guess the second is sort of is your utility doing regular COVID testing? And maybe those two are connected. If you're not requiring vaccinations, are you requiring COVID testing or not? So if you could just take a minute and fill out those two questions, that would give some information that we could get back to the other utility who's contemplating this issue. And just to amplify on the commissioner's discussion about financial issues, we know certainly that utilities are still seeing issues with customers not paying bills. And so to that end, next Wednesday, the 22nd, Mass Water Works will hold another roundtable for our members and utilities to discuss the issue of customer payments. And so anyone who's interested in attending that roundtable, it's 9:30 to 10:30. Feel free to email me and I can get you that Zoom link. We haven't opened it up to a larger group to sign up, but I will put that in the chat. You can email me, and I believe Ed Kiley from the Department of Housing and Community Development plans to be on that as well and can answer any questions about the low income program. They're still grappling with some of the implementation questions that the federal government has for how to roll that money out. But it will be going through the LIHEAP agencies to the utilities to pay customer bills. And so it will be important for you all to understand how you can get into an agreement with those agencies and how you can get that money to put towards your customer accounts. The customers will have to be LIHEAP eligible. And so that is a process that the customer themselves will have to undertake. So that's just another complicating factor in that program. All right, so let me end this poll and we will see what folks are doing for vaccinations. So I guess the majority are not requiring vaccinations. One is considering it, two are not considering it at all. And then it doesn't appear that anyone is requiring testing of employees. All right. So I think I didn't receive any questions in advance other than that one vaccination question that came from DEP. So we can certainly open it up now if folks have questions that they'd like to either put into chat, or if you're not able to do the chat, if you raise your hand or if you unmute, we can recognize you. Let me just check my email, make sure no one is emailing me into the. Damon has posted the video from the ARPA hearing so that you can see the advocacy that was done. It is a long 6.5 hours to get through. So if anyone's interested in our comments, I'm happy to send them along so you don't have to watch 6.5 hours. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Anyone want to unmute? All right. So with that, I guess we can end our call for today. We are now on a quarterly basis unless otherwise needed. So our next call would be slated for November 2nd, I think is, or December. We went with December.
December 14th.
December 14th. Thank you, Kathy.
Yes.
So December 14th. And in the meantime, again, those supply chain issues are important. And so feel free to reach out to me. And I have been passing that information along to both DEP and EPA, so keep them in the loop on that. And I know a couple of people have reached out to Warren on particular issues, and Kirsten King's on as well. Kirsten King is the contact for the Massachusetts Warren. So feel free to reach out to the Warren as well, and they can be helpful if you're really in dire straits. And I know some people have had some issues around the storms that have come and that sort of thing. So definitely feel free to reach out to Kirsten, and she's just put her email in chat as well. All right, with that, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Jane, for the time today. And Jane, thank you very much for recognizing all of us in our efforts in COVID. And I'd like to say that we are done with COVID, but we do obviously see the rise in cases, and that is concerning. So we're trying to do what we can to make sure that people still remain safe and well. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you.